Hello, everyone. Welcome to the November 8th Higher Education Tableau User Group meeting. We hope that you will join us on our Slack channel if you have not done so already. I can't imagine that you haven't, but you're missing out on a lot of fun stuff. I'm going to go ahead and put the link in our chat box so anyone who hasn't joined and would like to can do that. All right, so we're going to get started with a few announcements. Let's see. This month, we're going to have our Meet a Community member, Laura Urciuoli from MIT, followed by Tips and Tricks with Amanda Harper from Appalachian State, my coworker. And then Jeffrey Line will be doing a presentation. Jeffrey's from The Ohio State University. And then we'll have our wrap up and chat. But before we get into that, I'm going to open the floor to announcements. I know Ed Nelson from Georgia Tech had an announcement he wanted to make. Ed, if you're here, if you'd like to come off mute and share your announcement.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, we sure can.
Great, appreciate it. Could try and do my video here, but yeah, I have a position available at Georgia Tech with an exciting team supporting our Tableau service for campus. It's a IT service delivery lead. Would be reporting into the EADI team, Enterprise Applications and Data Integration team, and I will be posting. Oh, you already got it, the bit.ly link there. So Absolutely. Please take a look at that. We're wanting to move quickly on that, just because we don't want to leave those out there. What happens when you leave positions open? You don't want them to get swept. So yeah, I'm really excited to announce that. If you have any questions, I'll put my email address in here, and please feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you so much, Ed.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any announcements they'd like to share? All right, I don't hear any, so we'll just keep it moving right along. So today we're going to have Meet a Community member with Laura Urciuoli. She is a data analyst for resource development at MIT. She's part of MIT's advancement community, and before that, she worked in the annual fund in MIT's Alumni Association for about 5 years, and also at Worcester. I probably shouldn't even try to pronounce that. Polytechnic Institute, WPI. And before all of that, she researched fish. Yes, fish. It's a bit ironic because she has 2 cats, as you can see in the picture, Jinx and Merlin, and numerous foster kittens on the side. And cartoons tell us that, cats like to eat fish. So, well, that's the irony. So in her current role, Laura and her team build dashboards to help fundraisers use data to identify potential donors, prospects, and develop strategies to optimize outreach efforts, all the while rallying for data to be entered into the system and building out reusable database objects for business intelligence work across MIT's advancement community. So, Laura, are you ready?
I sure am. And you were it is Worcester or Worcester if you want to be a real New England accent, then you got it right. It's a hard one.
Awesome. Well, why don't you start by telling us a little about yourself and your role and your team?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm over at MIT in their resource development office, and that's the office that works with large donors. So we're talking about people who give upwards of 100K is the plan. And I've been in this office now for actually probably almost exactly a year. As I say that, that's kind of funny to think about. And prior to that, I was still at MIT in the same building and everything. So my commute did not change, thankfully, in the annual giving office. So that's gifts of under 100K. And before that, I was at WPI doing some stuff for them. And I am an analyst. I do a lot of dashboard building, and we, writing code for hopefully multiple dashboards for long-term usage for people who are, this position is called gift officers. So those are the people who kind of manage these individuals and ask for these gifts. There's teams that will fundraise for specific initiatives for like, schools, departments. We work with people who do stewardship. So they work with getting out scholarship information for those donors after they've given on a scholarship. There's a whole kind of world in advancement, and we kind of touch all of those users. So that is my current role, my team. There's currently 3 of us, myself, our supervisor, who's another analyst, and then we're lucky enough to have a data scientist / statistician. And previously, Roshni was on our team as well. So I'm lucky enough to have overlapped with her for a couple months and then a couple years when I was in annual giving, which was nice.
You are lucky. She's awesome.
Very lucky. It was a lot of fun.
What type of data do you work with?
So we work with primarily fundraising data. So anything from information about an individual, so biographic information, address information. We also work with their giving information, so people who've donated previously. And we work with a lot of that kind of stuff. And then, like I said, we have a statistician who does all these really great analyses that we then take and build a dashboard out with. So we work with a whole crop of information, everything under the moon that has to do with a person and what they could possibly have given to, or events they've attended, or anything like that.
That's neat. So not just financial data then.
No, we have a lot of, we all work in higher ed, so I'm sure you're all aware your alma mater knows more about you than you think they do.
So how do you use Tableau at work?
So we build out tools to help fundraisers kind of look at their portfolios. We also build tools like we just, like many colleges, we just closed a very large campaign. So we did a huge reporting, kind of making this giant dashboard, 2 giant dashboards actually, to reflect upon those 10 years of giving. So we build out a lot of dashboards, Tableau dashboards for users to kind of feel comfortable and get into their data and understand their data, in partnership with whatever database system we kind of use, which right now we're on advanced, but we're looking to change. So that'll be exciting. But I'm heavily in Tableau every day.
Do you have a favorite Tableau project you've worked on?
Yeah, it's funny. I probably would have said the same thing last year, which just goes to show how long you work on a really big dashboard. But we're still working on it. We're working on this dashboard that helps fundraisers prioritize their portfolio. So you have individuals who have a list of maybe like 100 alumni who they're working with to get a gift out of. Obviously, 100 is a really big number. Not everybody can see 100 people in a year, let alone have meaningful conversations with them. And so we are, our statistician, before I even got here, she had done an amazing research project that told us all this information about, how to get people to make transformative gifts, how to get people to donate real scholarship money, enough to get a new building, stuff like that. And we're now taking all that information and making a dashboard to look at, if you have a portfolio of 100 people, how do you sort those 100 people? How do you know when to tap this person, when to tap a different person? How do you know to get someone in that, 5-year pipeline? Because, if you're talking about a 6-figure gift, this doesn't happen overnight. This is a long trek that you're doing. And it's a really cool, slick dashboard. Like I said, I've been working on it for a year. It got put on pause to finish up our campaign stuff. But it'll have a lot of slick things. And I think a lot of data kind of hidden in it in a way that I don't know if our users will necessarily know they're interacting with quite as much data as they are, which will be really fun.
So how long have you been using Tableau, and how did you learn how to use it?
Yeah, it's funny. When Roshni said that she was going to ask me that, I was like, oh my God, I have to write on a piece of paper. I don't know. Anything post 2020, I can't count. I've probably been using Tableau for somewhere between 6 to 7 years, which is kind of funny to say out loud because it feels like a lot less time. I was over at WPI as actually an administrative assistant, but like you mentioned, I have my background in research. I have a master's in biology studying fish. So when you do a lot of research in bio, you become very comfortable with data sets and very comfortable with some basic statistics. And so I was in the annual giving office at WPI, and they got some Tableau licenses. And luckily enough, I had kind of proven myself to be comfortable enough in the data that they gave me one of those licenses. And it really was transformative. It was great. You know, we built some of the first dashboards, and I hope that they've built a lot more because that was, you know, year one lore of dashboards. But yeah, it's been about 7 years, and really it was just luck of somebody who, you know, saw somebody they wanted to teach a tool, and we ran with it, and it was really great.
Definitely. Do you have a favorite Tableau feature?
I mean, I have to say tooltips, because that is the thing I tend to present on. And my favorite dashboard that I'm working on, it relies heavily on hiding data, not hiding data, but hiding extra data, I would say, in tooltips. I think it's a feature that people, it kind of gets, you know, the end of the stick, I think. But it's kind of like, you know, I don't know if you've ever read this, but they always say when you're making a good salad, you're supposed to season the lettuce before you even put, you know, the dressing on. Everyone always talks up the dressing, but if you like season your greens, it steps it up. And I think having a fancy tooltip is like you're seasoning the salad before you put the dressing on. That's how I think of it.
I have to agree. I think tooltips are kind of the afterthought on a lot of dashboards.
Yes. But they take them up a notch. They go
Mhm.
from like entry-level dashboard to something like real slick. And it doesn't have to be very complicated. Yeah, I did a presentation a couple months back, so definitely go check out my amazing presentation.
You should. It was awesome. It's one of those you can watch over and over again.
I you know, all those views on YouTube, that video is definitely my parents who I told about, and they tried very hard to understand what I was saying. I don't know if any of you guys have tried to explain your jobs to family members, but they were like, "Oh, you do things, okay." So that was fun.
So is there a feature in Tableau you want to learn more about?
I always say actions. I think, and I say that as someone who uses actions probably and like parameters in every dashboard I build, but I think I've really only scratched the surface of, you know, the giant iceberg that is action parameter sets. I think that they really create not complicated, but expert level dashboards. And I think that, you know, when you first start to use them, they're very basic. They seem very simple. But when you start to layer them amongst themselves and get that right order and that kind of order of operations, I think that they can be a really powerful tool that I think I've probably only, you know, learned 25% of. So that's something that I really enjoy playing with, even though it does tend to be the thing that, you know, it's the hardest for me.
I think they're challenging too. What one thing do you wish you could go back in time and tell Tableau newbie you?
You know, I think that I don't think I would change much in my I mean, there are things you know, you look back at a dashboard you made even a year ago and you're like, man, what was I doing? You know, I could have simplified this a lot. There's a lot of that. But I think I would say to just, you know, enjoy it and play around. I think some of the things that I've learned and implemented into my dashboards are things I figured out because I just had a day where I said, you know what, I'm just going to play around in this data. I'm just going to, I'll message my supervisor and I'm like, I'm doing one of those days where I pretend I haven't done anything and I start from the beginning again and I click around and sometimes I figure out the answer to something that, you know, I think I've overcomplicated in my brain. So I would tell myself to kind of just take that step back when you're stuck in the weeds too much, you know, and that comes from a research background too, is when you're stuck in the weeds way too much, you need to have a day where you just like are like, okay, let's pretend we're starting over. What would I do? And sometimes that'll really change the work you're doing and help you kind of create some of the coolest functionality that I probably have created. So
that is really good advice. Do you use Tableau outside of work? And if so,
it's
how?
so funny. I always say I should. I've used it once. I do not watch sports. I am not a sports person. I had a group of friends who wanted to do a fantasy football league. My partner, who is a sports person, he mocked me and said I would never win because I didn't care about football and I didn't know anything about football. I took that as a challenge, and I did make a Tableau dashboard to help me with my draft. And I did end up winning that year, and immediately stopped caring the moment I won because I'd proven everybody wrong. And that's all I truly wanted out of it. So that was the one time I ever used a dashboard, and I did. I felt very fancy at the bar, doing our draft. And I was able to filter and quickly figure out what I should draft. It was a prideful moment for myself. I wish I had had more of them, but yeah.
Yeah, that's not easy. And data, that's where it's at.
It was great. Well, that's what my point was. All my friends were like, "You hate sports, you'll never win." And I was like, "Yeah, but I like data." And that's all I really needed. And I proved them all wrong. And then the next year I didn't do it again because I was like, let's end on a high note.
Yes.
We're good.
Is there anything else you want to share before we start the lightning round?
Oh, good question. I think for those of us who are like new in us, I feel like it's been 2 years new in Tableau. I think that the thing I would say to my newbie me is goes out to everybody, where I think it's worth just having a day where you just play around in Tableau, and maybe you use the same data that you're working on a dashboard, but you close that dashboard and you open up a blank slate. I think that's sometimes the best thing you can do, and it helps your brain reset. And then, of course, today, if it's a voting day, wherever you are, I just voted for the first time in Salem. I'm from New York City originally, and I have to say, much shorter lines, not in Queens. So that was really nice. It was like 3 people in the location. I was like, this is great. So everybody should definitely, get out there and vote. Take a nice break after this and go to your polling place and make sure you get, you vote if you haven't already.
Great advice. I mailed my ballot in days ago, so.
There you go. This was my first time not doing a mail-in Massachusetts, so I was excited. I got my sticker. I was like all ready to go.
Yay! All right, then we're ready for the lightning round. You know how it works.
All right.
All right, so today is International Day of Radiology. So for all you people who are bad to the bone, what's your favorite bone in the human body?
It's funny, when I was talking to Roshni about this, I actually deferred to the fish that I studied. They're called 3-spine stickleback, and they have 3 distinct spines on their back, which I think are technically bones, although I can't remember exactly. So those are my favorite bones on a fish body, but not on a human body.
All right, since you have a couple of very awesome cats, do you have a favorite? Be honest, Jinx or Merlin?
Oh man, this is hard. This is like asking someone to choose their favorite child. It's funny. My hope was we foster failed our most recent foster. And he's at the vet because he has a ringworm, which is very common in foster kittens, for those of you who have foster kittens. And my hope was to pick him up and be like, neither. But he's at the vet, the poor guy. Merlin was my first cat, so I think that's, he's got a special place in my heart as the one who turned me into a crazy cat lady. And he was adopted when he was an adult, so he's a little bit more, I think, appreciative, where Jinx I've had since she was a kitten, so she acts like she just expects to have everything. So I appreciate Merlin being a little bit nicer and thankful, while Jinx is like, hand me, she was born with a silver spoon in her mouth.
All right. Since you are originally from Queens, what is your favorite Queens neighborhood?
Oh, well, I am from Sunnyside, which I guess if I look at this map, actually the top map is not everything. Let's see, it'd be in the bottom map somewhere. But that's where I'm from. I'm from Sunnyside, which is right outside of Astoria. We are a huge Halloween district. For any of you guys who are in the New York area, my parents, they ran out after 1,300 trick-or-treaters. So if you're from New York or in New York and you have children, Sunnyside Gardens, definitely go there and you'll see my parents will give you exactly one piece of candy. You do not get more than one. They're not made of candy money. So, but yeah, so that is my favorite neighborhood.
That's amazing. That's a lot of trick-or-treaters. We had one.
Yes, it's a lot. I know. And I live in Salem now, and my parents thought I would get thousands, and I don't. They still get more than me every year.
So from one Halloween capital to the next. All right. So back to our Queen's theme. What is your favorite Queen song?
Ooh. I think I don't remember what it's called. Bicycle. I want to ride my bicycle. I don't know why. I think that song, a friend of mine played it many years ago when we were in college, and it became my favorite. I like a good song from Queen that's just like they just want to sing about riding a bicycle. You know, we don't have to make every song complicated and existential. Sometimes it can just be about enjoying a bicycle ride. But maybe that song has a very deep meaning, in which case I have not interpreted it correctly.
And that has a really it just gets in your head, that song does.
It does. It gets stuck in your head, and it's hard not to feel a little silly and giddy when you listen to it, which I enjoy.
Yeah. And this Viz is awesome, by the way. I put the link in the chat. It's just, it does that automation by itself. So I don't know how it works, but it's awesome. All right. So since you're now living in Salem, do you prefer Samantha from Bewitched or Sabrina the Teenage Witch?
I mean, I grew up in the 90s. My first cat was named Salem, so I really am a Sabrina girl by heart. We do have a Bewitched Samantha statue in Salem, Mass, because there was exactly one episode that was filmed here. So there is a statue that actually was recently, like this past fall, like died. Somebody threw paint on it. It was quite an exciting week for us in Salem. I know, it was very interesting. I actually it was red paint, so I was like, keep it. It's kind of spooky. But I'm definitely a Sabrina. I can't, and old Sabrina. I appreciate younger generations. You know, you gotta keep them engaged. But I did love a good Melissa Joan Hart, Sabrina, and Harvey. Just that's definitely my place.
That's what I grew up with too.
It's a good show.
Yeah, it is November. It's Thanksgiving month in the US, and as everyone knows, Thanksgiving pies are traditionally better than pie charts. So do you prefer pumpkin pie or apple pie or some other type?
I mean, out of the two, I think I'm probably a pumpkin pie, but pecan, you can't go wrong. But we actually celebrate Thanksgiving with my partner's family, who are Russian. And they make different kinds of these cakes that kind of have like a bunch of like nuts, almost like a fruit cake. So we have neither pie at our Thanksgiving. We have these other kind of funny, almost fruit cake like pies, which could be really nice. But I'm definitely a pecan pie person.
I'm a coconut cream pie person, so.
Oh yeah, well yeah. If we're putting everything on the table, you know, if we're choosing from anything, let's go. You know, Cheesecake Factory. S'mores, you know, let's just go all out.
Nice. So today is also National Cook Something Bold and Pungent Day. So what's on your menu? What are you cooking tonight?
Oh my God, National Bold and Pungent Day. That is like right up my partner's alley. He loves a good like funky food. Actually, we're driving up to Vermont tonight with both of the cats in the car. It'll be very exciting. So we'll probably have like trash Wendy's spicy chicken sandwich. If that hits anybody right in the stomach, that you're my kind of person. We'll probably get that on our drive. Oh, ricotta pie. Somebody said that. Sorry, my grandmother used to make ricotta pie. If you couldn't tell by my last name, I'm very Italian. But yeah, for tonight, we're currently not cooking anything. But last week I made a really good eggplant dip, which was really nice. So, but it was not pungent.
Well, if anybody has bold and pungent recipes they want to share in the chat, I'm always looking for something fun to make. And I could always use help deciding what's for dinner. Although tonight it's going to be steak. So
Ooh.
it is also National Cappuccino Day. Who knew November 8th was such a special day? So as a former barista of 9 years, I have to ask, do you like coffee or cappuccino?
Oh, it's funny. I'm actually drinking a latte right now. I love a good cappuccino. My partner, whose parents are Russian, after dinner, his stepmother's always like, cappuccino, cappuccino. Anybody want a cappuccino? The Europeans, they love a cappuccino after dinner. So I do love a nice cappuccino right after eating. It's actually really good. I like it. So definitely cappuccino.
And it is also Harvey Wallbanger Day. I don't know if you've ever had one. I actually kind of like them. They're like a very retro cocktail. But what would you say is your favorite cocktail? And have you ever had a Harvey Wallbanger?
I don't think I've ever had a Harvey Wallbanger. Although it does sound really good. I am definitely a super like fruity, summery beach drink. And within the last couple of years, I have strongly gotten into Mai Tais. And I enjoy any drink that comes in like a funny shaped glass with some sort of umbrella on top, a funky straw. I am down, but I think currently I'm a Mai Tai person. I love them.
Yummy. All right, and we'll wrap it up with the person who's not into sports by asking, are you a fan of the Red Sox or the Yankees or the Mets?
It's funny, I am born in Queens, but my father is from Jersey. So genetically, I am a Yankees fan. Again, I do not care about sports, especially not baseball, much to my father's sadness. But in terms of local sports, I think my partner, he's a huge Celtics fan. He is into basketball. So I probably, if I had to name basketball players, the Celtics is probably the only place I can name them from. So that's probably the sports team I have most affinity to, whether it's by choice or not, I don't know.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Laura. That wraps up our Meet a Community member for November. If anybody is interested in being a Meet a Community member next year, because we're already booked for the rest of this year, reach out, let us know. We'd love to have you. All right, so now I'm going to introduce our tips and tricks speaker for this month. Amanda Harper is my fabulous coworker. She's been in higher education for nearly 14 years in a variety of roles, from enrollment management, technology solutions, to reporting and data analytics. So as a business intelligence analyst at Appalachian State, she works with campus partners to help them become more informed and realize the value that data and analytics plays in effective decision making. She started working with Tableau 4 years ago and has been learning new things ever since. So today she's going to teach us about data automation using Tableau Prep. So Amanda, you want to share your screen?
Thanks, Jenny. I'm also running the slide deck. So if y'all will bear with me, I'm going to stop this share and reshare my own in just a moment. All right, can you see my other screen?
Sure can.
Okay, so thanks very much for that intro, Jenny. Like she mentioned, my name is Amanda Harper, and I am a BI analyst in our IR office here at App State. And so for this month's tips and tricks segment, I wanted to highlight two options that can be used for automating your data. So on our campus, we are asked very frequently to have updated data available for a variety of different projects. So we've explored two paths that eliminate that manual aspect of keeping your data fresh. A couple little highlights, and then I'm just going to get right into the demos. But as we all are aware, there are really several pros to automating data. First, like I mentioned, keeping your data fresh. An example for us right now, we're in an early registration period, which is going on now for the spring term. So we have hourly dashboard refreshes in place to monitor seat availability or registration activity, or as an aid for those academic advisors who are working directly with the students on their schedule building for the spring term. Automation also goes hand in hand with eliminating the need to manually refresh. And then finally, it just allows you to kind of refresh it whenever you need. That could be a daily, that could be an hourly, that kind of thing. So far, the only con that I've found is that it does take a little more upfront time to get kind of the elements in place and everything tested out. So that's the only con so far. I'm going to show two options, like I mentioned, that we use on our campus to accomplish automation. The first one utilizes an element of the data management module from Tableau server. And then the second one utilizes a more build it yourself kind of approach, using some of the built-in functionality in Tableau Prep and pairing that with a task scheduler on your own system. So for the first option, this utilizes what's specifically called a Tableau Prep conductor. And as I mentioned, that is a part of the data management module on server. And this really allows you to compile and clean the data in Tableau Prep, which I'm sure many of us do already. You then publish that flow to the server, and then really seamlessly, you can schedule it to run whenever needed. So kind of, as I said, a set it and forget it kind of approach. You can connect to various data inputs. You can create custom task schedules, and then you can monitor the task flow, submission, did it complete, that kind of thing really easily on the server. And we actually utilize two servers in our office, and one of those does have the data management add-on. So we've been using this component for about a year now. So it's been working pretty well. So let me jump over to my remote system. Okay, can you confirm if you're seeing my Tableau Prep?
I could see it.
Okay, thank you. All right, so you're probably familiar if you utilize Tableau Prep here. The first thing that we want to do is just make sure you're signed into your server. So you obviously do that through the server window here. And then once you have your flow ready to go, your data is ready, you're compiled, you've cleaned, you have your output pointing to your server data source. You're going to publish your flow, which I'm not sure many, you can do the publishing of the flow without the Tableau Prep conductor component. So you might be doing this already, but pretty standard window here. Choose the project, name your flow, add a description if you want to. The one area I did want to highlight here was on the connections section. Just make sure that your credentials are all good to go here based on what your inputs are, and that you've embedded your passwords, whenever needed. So once you publish this, it will bring you to this flow page here, and we can see this is our flow. And this is really fine as is. We could leave this here, manually run it anytime we needed to refresh the data, and that would be all fine and well. But that's not why we're here today. So with the Tableau Prep conductor option, we can set this up so that we can eliminate that manual running of the data. So to start, I did want to mention that you'll want to check with your server admin, as they'll be the one to create any custom options on the task schedule. So I'll show you that in just a moment, but just be sure to talk to them if you have any really custom options that frequencies that you want to run your data. So really it's pretty straightforward. So here's our flow. We're going to create a new task here. And as I mentioned, first step, choose your schedule. You'll see some of these are the built-in Tableau function or Tableau options. And then we have some custom ones here that we have on our campus. I'm just going to choose one of these for purposes of this. You have the choice here to choose automatically include all of the outputs, or select. Obviously, this is just a fake data flow here. We only have one output. You could change that here if needed. And then another nice feature here is you can set up a notification subscription to automatically be sent to you or whoever would need to know that the job did complete. It'd also notify you if for whatever reason it errored and wasn't successful. You can add a message here. And then I also noticed that you can do the output data in the email, which is kind of interesting, if that would be something of interest to you. I also wanted to highlight this linked tasks section. We are not currently utilizing this functionality, but it would be really, really useful if, say, this flow was a part of a series and needed to be linked with another. So this allows you to set them up to run one right after the other. And that's really the only settings to get this scheduled. So I'm going to go ahead and create this task for us here. And now you can see, we can see our status. We can see the schedule that it's run on here. When the time comes, you can manage your connections from this page if you needed to. You can also go back and see this task runs every day of the week, every 15 minutes. When it does run for those 15 minutes, you'll be able to see the run history here. So you can go back in time to see the last time that it ran. And then subscriptions, where I subscribe to that, I'll be here. You could also add other users there. So all this being said, if you have the data management module on your server and you're looking to really easily update data using Tableau Prep, this would be a really great option. So I'll pause. Do we want to do questions while I jump back over?
Does anybody have questions to put in the chat? How often do you get the add-on? Or sorry, how do you get the add-on?
Oh, so you will probably work with your Tableau account manager to get that. That is the path that we did. So if you know who that person is, whenever you make changes to your server setup, or if you have to add licenses or anything like that, your Tableau account manager would be the person to set that up for you and answer questions and give you the pricing and all of that.
Any other questions? Can you remind me how this then connects to a specific dashboard?
Sure. So I didn't highlight that component here, but basically so the flow with the end output in your flow is a Tableau server data source. So your flow's on the server, you schedule it, and then you also are pushing your actual data source. So when you're going to your desktop file, connecting the data, you're connecting right to that server. So as soon as the flow executes, it updates the data, then your dashboard reflects that. And so if you're ever familiar with the refresh button on your Tableau desktop or your Tableau desktop dashboard file, that is how it connects all the parts together. So if you have it updating every 15 minutes, your dashboard's pulled up, you click that refresh button and it will continuously pull, that refresh data.
The next question is, where or how do you store your non-database data like NESI results?
So if all roads lead to Tableau Prep. So for us, or for me in particular, if we have a static data set somewhere like that, you can store it just in a normal method and bring it into your Tableau Prep. So on that connection section, if you recall, we had a couple of connections. I had like a database connection, maybe to Oracle, and then I had maybe a Microsoft SQL connection. That would just be another file in your Tableau Prep input there on the left-hand side. So that if it's static, it will automatically save when you publish the flow. And then obviously, if you're connected to a database, like I just mentioned, those connections, that's what I was meaning when you embed your login there, that will save your logins to your databases.
If you don't have a data management module, is there a way to still schedule the flows?
Yes, that is my next option. So I'm going to go.
Perfect. Perfect.
So maybe we want to segue into that. So what we highlighted uses some functionality on our server that is, a component of Tableau, but there is a way to do it that is kind of the build your own path. So let me get to that. So follows roughly the same path that we just that we just looked at, but you just essentially set everything up yourself. So by tapping into Tableau Prep's built-in scripts behind the scenes, you can execute the flow, schedule that to run automatically in the background. So this might get a little technical. I'm not a technical person, so just trust that this is not coding or anything like that, but it's just a few steps to get it set up. So same as before, I just wanted to highlight, you can connect to various data inputs, maintain your own frequency schedules and things like that. The one difference here, I would definitely recommend, organization is key. And so you'll be maintaining all of your files yourself. So having a good structure in place from the start is a good way to go here. This process, I wanted to show this just to kind of tell you a little bit about what it's doing in the background. But basically, the task scheduler reads a batch file at whatever specified time you have it set to, daily, hourly, whatever. The batch file and the script execute the flow and publish it to the server. So all in all, you'll have 3 files that go along with this build it your own self process. The batch file, a credentials file, which is, I'll show you in a moment, but basically it just holds all your credentials, and then the actual Tableau Prep flow file. And I did want to mention documentation is available on this. So I put the link here and I can put it, it'll be in the slides for later, but here are those example files that I just told you about. On the left here, you'll see the credentials file. And so you will need input connections for all of your input sources. I just put some fake data there, but like, as I mentioned, if you're connecting to Oracle or SQL Server or something like that, you'll need those connections. And then you will also need the connection to your output or your server, and your server admin will be able to provide that to you. But that basically, the output connection just allows you to publish directly to the server. And then on the right-hand side there is just the example batch file. I honestly never really look at this. It just lives in the background. But basically the batch file just says, go to this location, use the script from Tableau Prep, run my credentials file, and then execute the flow. It's basically all that's going on here. And then just a few things I wanted to put on the slide deck just for reference. Since you're managing this on your own, once you update your credentials, don't forget to update them in your credentials file. And then as new prep versions are released, you can update the batch file to point to the new script. I don't know if, I'll jump back one. So right here, this is pointing to Tableau Prep Builder. This is just a fake, but 2019.3. So once those update, the new version, you can update to the new script if you want to. And then something that's kind of key here is all your input sources. Back to the example or the question about the NESI result. So all of your input sources that are static like that need to be localized and not stored on a shared drive. So you can't put it on a shared drive from your office and then the batch will not be able to recognize a shared drive. So it needs to be local. So with that being said, I'm going to jump back over to my other screen here, and I am going to demo this just really briefly. So for this option, the flow looks exactly the same as before. So you've done all your work. Your output source is pointing to your server data file. But instead of publishing the flow like we did in the previous option and then adding a schedule on the server, we're going to do that on our own system. So what I'm going to show today is using the task scheduler on Windows, but the same functionality can be done with a Mac scheduler as well. So using Windows Task Scheduler, you can see that, I'm just going to open up this one here. There's a few specifics to choose to get everything set up, and then you're basically good to go. So you can see I have a task here that runs whether I'm logged on or not and is hidden. And that basically just means that this task is going to run on the background forever until I tell it to stop, whether I'm actively logged on or not in the background of my system here. I have it, this is the frequency. So if we recall back to option number 1, we set the schedule where we chose every 15 minutes, the same thing you could do here. You can choose your trigger. This one happens to be a daily update that happens at 7:50 a.m. every day. But you can really set this to be whatever you want to. You can repeat it every 5, 10, 15, 30, however you would want to do that. And definitely anything like that. And then finally, the last step that you need to set up is the action. And so if you remember our batch file, basically the action just calls this file here. It basically executes the script behind the scenes that goes out and looks at your credentials and runs your flow to push the data to the server. And really, the other tabs don't really matter. So those are really the only 3 steps. So it's essentially the same thing as we looked at. It's just you're doing everything yourself. You can still monitor the task activity like we did on the server. So you can see next run time, last run time, was it successful the last time? I'm sure there's probably some trigger out there that you can maybe set an email if it failed. I haven't done that yet, but you can still monitor here, just like on the server. So we really utilize both of these approaches. As I mentioned, we have 2 different servers with 2 different setups. So we really do utilize both of these regularly. And I found that they, work really, really well to keep the data fresh across the board. So with that, I'll jump back over to the slides. And if there are any other questions, I'll take those now. Hopefully that was, I know it was kind of high level, but hopefully it opened up some paths for people who want to do this.
We do have a couple other questions that came into the chat. Can these automation tools also be accessed if the data is prepared on Stata? I hope I'm saying that right.
I have never personally connected Tableau Prep to that. If you can, like I said, all roads just have to lead to Tableau Prep. So if you can get the data in Tableau Prep, then it will work.
The next question is, after Prep Conductor runs server side and replaces a dashboard's data source, does the dashboard go and pick up the changes, or do you have to manually hit the data refresh button on the dashboard?
So that's a great question. It really depends on the caching of the internet browser that you are using. So 9 times out of 10, if your flow is running in the background, everything's working, I organically go pull up the page, it will be there. Sometimes the caching does mess it up. So if I've had the page pulled up and for whatever reason, I know this is an hourly, best practice for myself is I put a refresh time right on the home page of the dashboard. So just a training of end users. If they see that it's 3:52 and the dashboard says the data is fresh as of 2:52, then they're going to automatically go ahead and click the refresh button. So it really just depends. The caching is a big factor to consider there. So we try to train as best we can so that people know to refresh automatically when they get there, just to have the most up-to-date information.
And then the last question of the day is, if you have data management, what is the benefit of using the scripts?
So I'm guessing that meaning option 1 versus option 2. So if you have data management on your server, I probably wouldn't say use the scripting, build your own version personally, just because with the data management tool, it's all kind of nice and a clean little package for you to set up there. The reason that we have both options is because we have 2 servers that aren't set up the same. So one has data management, we're using that. The other one does not. So we do the build your own approach because we need refresh data frequently. So hopefully that answers your question.
And we are recording the event, and that will be sent out either on our Slack group or posted on the event page. If you're not on the Slack group, usually within the week. So just keep an eye out for that. All right. Thank you so much, Amanda. We really appreciate it. I even learned something, and I work with you. So
that's great. And if anyone has other questions, just let me know. I'll put my email there. And I'm going to bear with me. I'm going to switch back to the other slides now.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. So some of what Amanda was talking about with the scripting, there's a third way to do it using some of the DataDev tools. And that is what we are going to spend the rest of the session on, is some of the DataDev tools, starting with introducing this wonderful little dinosaur. Hold on. This dinosaur here, Flex. So Flex is the mascot for the Tableau DataDev program. And so you probably have a ton of questions. So what is DataDev? What does DataDev have a dinosaur, or why does DataDev have a dinosaur mascot? And why is that mascot named Flex? And is he doing yoga poses? And the answer is yes, he is doing yoga poses. So Amanda, if you want to switch over to the next slide. So what's the deal with that T-Rex? That's the easiest question. So this slide shows what Tableau's website says about the dinosaur. Basically, the folks behind Tableau are a bunch of nerds who enjoy Easter eggs to old versions of Tableau. They also like dressing up in dinosaur hoodies. There's also pictures floating around of folks in full-on dinosaur costumes at some of the DataDev hackathons, including the outgoing CEO or COO, I'm honestly not sure, of Tableau in a full-on dinosaur costume. So DataDev it's a very fun program. If you want to go on to the next slide. So the most important question is, why is the T-Rex named Flex? Or at least that's my next most important question. And it also gets into some of the other questions. So the DataDev program is all about giving you the Tableau workbook creator, the server admin, or the server or cloud end user some flexibility. Hence Flex as the name for the dinosaur. There are tools that help you automate tasks. So one of the things, using the similar command line option that Amanda showed us for Tableau Prep, we actually use one for Tableau Server to load users and populate local groups onto our server. That was then later converted to using the REST API and the Python Tableau Server client library, which are part of the developer tools, to programmatically just like get people from one program that is outside of Tableau and outside of our Active Directory and into a separate program into Tableau Server, sort of to just mirror users and groups in two places. We've played with things like the metadata API to learn more about data sources and more programmatically look at what calculated fields are used across workbooks. And I also use it as an end user. You know, we had a workbook that had to be snapshotted quarterly for every value of a filter. And in the past, this was something that someone would manually do. They would go through every single value of the filter, pick a value, click the export button, export it to PDF, make sure they saved it with the right name, then go back to the dashboard and switch the filter value and do that for 120 filter values, which is a whole lot of time. And we were able to automate a lot of that using the REST API. And even though our users no longer actually need to do that on a quarterly basis, it turns out our auditors do. So the work we stopped actually having to run that function as a regular thing. Now we only run it at year end to get snapshots for our auditors. You can also use it for things like appending data to an extract or updating or scheduling a Tableau flow and that sort of thing. And there's automation with webhooks where you can say, once a refresh is complete, send a message to a Slack group or send the dashboard and a screenshot of the dashboard to a Slack channel. So there's all sorts of things that you can do with Tableau developer tools, including like embedding workbooks on a web page and using JavaScript to control filters. And that can have sort of, something that some places might use for a cleaner look. And also a little bit more better performance, because you're not having Tableau refresh all of those filter values. You're doing it all through JavaScript. Some of you have probably heard of the Qualtrics web data connector. You've probably tried to connect to server data or to survey data through Qualtrics, and there is a web data connector that has already been built out that does that. But you can create your own if there's a data source that is available via some sort of API endpoint. You can actually create your own. One potential use case in our environment is with iPads data. I've seen numerous Slack messages about, hey, can who's gotten this iPads data or this other student data source? And if there's an online version, and the Urban Institute and other groups have put together online data sets that have API endpoints, you can actually build a web data connector that goes directly to that sort of the live version of that data set, rather than having to get an export in the spreadsheet and then update that spreadsheet every month or year or quarter or however long or however frequently you update the data. So all of that, there's just a lot of flexibility. And what's linked to flexibility? Yoga. So yeah, that is Flex doing yoga poses. Those yoga poses, they change from year to year. He's been in Cobra pose and some sort of warrior pose, and probably a few others by this point. So if the next, Jeffrey's going to get into this a lot more, but there are just a bunch of APIs that Tableau has built, and they have documentation about how to do this, examples posted on GitHub. And a few years ago, Tableau actually started some learning projects to help people who don't write Python code, who don't do JavaScript, actually get comfortable with doing some of these things. And that's how I earned my stuffed Flex. I'll do pretty much anything for swag. They've been doing a bingo challenge lately, and that has both, beginner, intermediate, and even more expert level challenges that help you learn about individual APIs and even string some of them together to do cool things. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in the Tableau developer portal, and it's a free program that you can sign into. There's no like cost associated. You don't have to put in your license information or anything. You just have to give them your email. But it gives you a whole lot of access to all the resources around the Tableau data developer tools, including access to a Slack space that has people at all different levels who can help you get where you want to go. It includes some DataDev ambassadors and also Tableau staff. They're the ones who are actually creating and maintaining and improving the code behind the tools to help us, use those tools. And they're there to help you get started and work through any thorny issues you have, the same way that the HE-Tab community is there. So if you're still trying to figure out how you might use Tableau developer tools at your school, Jeffrey Line is here to share some of how OSU's Wexner Medical Center, that's OSU, the Ohio State University. I've got to always say that. Wexner Medical Center uses the various Tableau APIs. So if you guys remember back a little bit over a year ago, Jeff actually came and talked to us about one use, which is getting, I think, Python the results of Python functions into Tableau calculated fields. And he's here now to show us this other side of the Tableau developer tools. So he was born and raised in Columbus, Ohio. He's been an IT professional for 29 years, so he knows a little something about a whole lot of things. And he's been using Tableau for 12 plus years, primarily in administration, and the last 7 of those have been at OSU WMC. He loves his job because it changes based on what he's doing day to day. He's been married for 28 years, has 2 adult daughters, and will be taking his dream vacation later this year, a full month off. You're going to see where he's going. And much to Flex's delight, Jeff also believes you can't go wrong with a good dinosaur movie. And he and his youngest love to watch Jurassic Park movies together. So, Jeff, if you want to go ahead and take it away.
Sure. Thank you for having me. Let me share my screen. Let me get this in presentation mode first. Share. Okay, can you guys all see my higher education Tableau APIs my screen?
We sure can.
Okay. So here I'll do a extra introduction. Roshni was very kind with her introduction for me. I got some other stuff to talk about. Basically, I'm going to talk about what is an API. I'm like, what are the APIs? And then I'll discuss. I have several business cases that we're using these for, and then I'll have time for Q&A as well too. So, Ki ora, or hello. That's one of the key phrases where I'm going. So my name's Jeff Line. I'm a data engineer, Tableau administrator. Those are my official titles. However, I know a little about a lot of things. So some lesser known facts. I'm the only non-collegiate athlete in my family. My first job was a temp, and then I got hired full time. Contrary to popular belief, I did know COBOL and JCL programming. And I kind of wish I still knew it because there is a market for consultants. Yes, I am taking a dream vacation later this year. It's going to be a 1 month, totally disconnected. I'm excited about that. So I'm going to visit my daughter. So I asked her to give me some slang terms. So I created this little sentence. Oops, let me go back a slide. Back a slide. So I'll be sure to pack my togs and jandals, hoping we don't need our gum boots too much. And it should be awesome as mean. Let's get started with this Chinway. I'll let you know what those slang words are at the end of my slide, but they're slang in the country that I'm going to. So what is an API? It's an application programming interface, which allows you to connect to the backend system. Obviously, we're talking about Tableau, so there's many APIs that you can interface with Tableau's backend system. And it's very flexible as we have our DataDev TRX. So what are they? I'm like, there's a ton of them. I put these 4 up there because these are the ones that I have used, and I'll talk about most of them. The REST API is a programmatic access to work with your content, users, sites. Good use case, add users, add projects, stuff like that. Metadata API. You can query and discover metadata about your Tableau content and external assets. Document API. This is relatively new within a couple years. You can programmatically modify Tableau files. Why would you want to do that? If you develop a process where you're migrating content from, let's say, a test server to a production server, and you need to change your database connection string, you can use a document API for that. The Harper API, this is how you can create, modify, append anything into the Harper files. You can find plenty more on this site. So, business case number 1, metadata ingestion. Our metadata tool that we have has issues ingesting Tableau's metadata automatically. The only reliable way to do that is via a file. Frowny face for me. So automate. So we needed to, what is important to us to import metadata into our system, knowing it has limitations. So our solution, we chose to focus on the data sources, not necessarily the workbooks, how things are interconnected, because our team creates and produces data sources and publishes them to the server that the entire medical center will use to create their dashboards. So we wanted to be able to provide them information about those particular data sources that we're producing. So we use the document API to do this. This works on a file that's locally on your PC. You run the program. And what we've done is, obviously we're getting the field name, data type, aggregation. If it's a calculation, it'll populate the calculation, and description. Now within the description, we prefixed a couple things in there so that we could parse it out. Description is obviously the description, and then lineage. We really wanted to tie that particular field in the data source back to the source system. The reason we do that is, one of the later cases is because we want to allow that lineage from data source to actual source, which if you had the data management add-on, it would do that for you. Unfortunately, we don't have that. So here's one snippet of code. I'm not going to show a lot of code out there, but this is one way that we did this. So we're using the document API. This is within Python. And basically we're stripping out, we're looking at all this is looking at a surgery workbook or a data source, and we're pulling out field name, data type. Is there any aggregation, description, calculation, and then we print it to a file, which looks something like this. So this is the output of that program. Now, this was one step in the process. I'm not going to bore you with the other, but we also had to add in additional elements based upon things within this file on how we will import it into our metadata solution. So that was the first business case. As you can see, I have an image over here of another clue as to tell you where I'm going. Business case number 2, column deprecation. So towards the end of last year, our EMR system, Epic, deprecated a column, and they do this probably multiple times in a year. However, this column that we were using is primarily used to join to other tables for filtering. So it's used in, if you're joining 2 tables together, or if you're using a where clause to filter custom SQL. So we needed to identify all the assets on our server where this column is in a data source or is embedded in a workbook's data source. And it's used within custom SQL. And, oh, by the way, we also use initial SQL, which if you use the data management tool, a couple things that it doesn't parse, it doesn't really do a good job of initial SQL. If you use the column in a join, or if the column is used in a where clause. So those are 3 areas where the data management tool would not be applicable. So the solution, we used multiple processes to find what we ultimately needed to be fixed. So we started with identify all the assets that were connecting to the server. We knew the server, in this instance, a SQL server that we were connecting to. So we wrote a PostgreSQL query to grab all the assets that we needed. We then downloaded all the assets and data sources. This was using the REST API, because I believe at the time there's probably over 200 assets that we needed to scrub through. Once all those assets were down, then we needed to pick out the initial SQL. For that, we used the document API. Now, we also needed to grab all the custom SQL. So we used the metadata API with graphical interface. And I'll show you that in a second. And then we had to identify all the assets where the column was used, still using the metadata API with the graphical interface. And then unfortunately, we had to manually review it, and then we had to remediate it. So in all, it was probably, out of the 200 assets, we probably needed to touch 75 of them to fix them. So it was a very long process. So here's another snippet of code. So this is using the document API again. And all we're doing from this one is grabbing the initial SQL, and then we dumped it into a file. It actually comes out in a JSON file. And then what we did is we loaded that up into a Tableau workbook. And then we kind of did a regular expression search on the initial SQL for the column that we were looking for to identify the potential assets that we needed to look at. Or maybe we looked at the SQL itself to determine, yeah, this isn't, we don't need to change this one, it's already fine, it already has different filtering, or perhaps it was in a comment that somebody commented out, but they still left the comment in there with that code. So the metadata API, you can interface it with Python, or there's also graphical interface. So if you if you have access to this, full disclosure, I am an admin, so I have access to pretty much everything. So you put in your URL, your server name, /metadata, /graphical. So this allows you to query your metadata differently. This is kind of gives you, if you have the data management add-on and you search for, in this instance, we're searching for a column. It happened to be server_area_ID. You could do the same search in the data management add-on. You could see what is dependent upon it, which is below it, what is it's dependent upon, which is above it. So you can navigate up or down from that column. So using this graphical interface, you could write a query, and then this is the output that we got. And then you can look at the data source. You know, luckily there was only 4 of these that we needed to look at, and we didn't really need to do anything. So the other one was custom SQL. So this query grabs all the custom SQL that has been parsed on Tableau server. So we added some additional elements, you know, what workbook data source it connected to, who was it or who owns it, because they really need to look at it. And then actually this big nasty custom SQL query that we have. So we ran this query, we grabbed everything from it, pasted it in a JSON file, and then loaded it into a Tableau workbook, and then kind of did some regular expressions matching on this custom SQL. And then we're able to identify the data sources or workbooks that needed to be changed. So you could write all this in Python. Now, full disclosure, this was last year, and I was just touching the surface of this API, and I found this. So this was a lot easier for me to implement to get the results than to try and do this in Python. Plus, it's very, you write the query and it's real time, so you can see as your data is refreshing per your query. Business case number 3. So this is actually new. Database migration. So we have many assets that connect to a database that is being migrated to another server or transitioned to another server. Unfortunately, they did not use an alias. They used the actual physical server name of this database in the connection. Now, yes, I could go on the server and also change those to the new server. The other problem was there was, sadly to say, lacking in documentation of why we're connecting to this server, what is the automation process for this data. So we're taking the approach of we need to identify these assets, which this is ongoing. So we're going to identify the assets that we need to migrate. So basically we need to know what databases and tables they're connecting to so that we make sure that those get migrated and documented, and the process that loads them migrated as well to the new server. So we'll work on a plan to migrate that to the new server. Once we identify all this, this is going to be a long project because there's a lot of assets that have this case. Business case number 4, automation. There's too much manual administration. I'm the only admin, and I was on a talk many years ago, and the guy said, if you do something more than twice, you need to automate it. So automating it will free up some of my time to do some other areas of research in Tableau or other areas in our business. So we're going to try and automate as much as we can using the REST APIs. And a good reference for this is a Tableau server client library, which is more of a wrapper around the REST APIs. So you don't necessarily need to write the URL API endpoints, put in your body and headers for the call. You can just make a nice little call in Python or your programming choice to do this. So we currently have a couple jobs that are running in production. So we tag content to be stale. So our definition of stale is, which it may be loose in how we define it, but we need it to start someplace and we may rein it back. So if your content has 10 or less views and it's been on the server 180 days, it will be tagged as stale content. So now the next piece that's running is archiving the content. So while we could just delete the content off the server, a deletion is very permanent and doesn't allow the end user, if they missed the email that said their content's being archived, a chance to recover. So we chose to archive it locally, delete it off the server, provide them a visualization that says this is the content that has been archived. If you would like to have it restored, you can put in a request and we can send you the link, and then it's up to them to put it back on the server if they want it. Other things that we have developed, we just haven't implemented them. We utilize a development project on our server. So we use, it's basically production, but before going to a project, they put it in a sub-project where everybody has access to publish to. So part of data governance is we can't allow all users to have access to the content. So we will remove if they inadvertently add all users to view their content. Now, also because we're utilizing one environment for them to test, and we'll also be doing the same thing for subscriptions and extracts, because those can adversely affect production subscriptions and extracts. So we will remove those off the assets that are being tested or reviewed by the business. The other one that we're trying to do is trigger our extract refreshes when the actual source has been loaded in the database. So once we load the database, we'll fire off a job that then kicks off the data source extract. So this way we can hopefully shift our extracts earlier in the morning. Like if you're notice the server, everybody always wants to schedule stuff between 6 and 9 a.m. because that's when people come into the business, and that's when the server's being hit the most and there's probably the most activity. So we're trying to shift our extracts to be earlier in the morning so we can alleviate some of the bottlenecks when most of our users are using the system. And then the last one that I'm working with, which kind of I was necessitating this since I'm taking a month off, is in our environment, our projects are locked down, so it's more of a centralized deployment. So admins or site admins publish content to projects. So I'm working on a mechanism using the REST APIs to programmatically deploy somebody's asset, whether it's a workbook or data source, provided they download the data, and then we will process it using a Python script on some schedule. So that's, let me go on to the next slide. So as Roshni said, I am taking my dream vacation this year. So the sentence that I had before, I'll be sure to pack my togs, which is a bathing suit, and jandals, which correlates to flip-flops, hoping we don't need to use our gum boots, which are rain boots, too much. And it really should be awesome as. So when this was explained to my daughter, if you add AS at the end of something, it means like really awesome. So awesome as is really awesome. Mean means cool. Let's start this Chenwei, which is chat. And then some of the images that I posted up there, this happens to be a totem of the indigenous, for the indigenous Mao, I probably mispronounce this, Maori people. Their sports teams do a lot of hakas. Primary sport is rugby. And these happen to be the two flags. So if you don't know, it's New Zealand and Australia. And so these are some reference links. I think Roshni is going to paste these in the chat. I did see one question, I think it was Andy, ask what's the difference between the Tableau Coders Initiative, which is right here. That's a user group. The development program is an overall. The Coders Initiative is put on by Zach and Kyle from Zach Geis and Kyle Massey from Chase Bank to walk through the various APIs at a high level. So if you go out to this link, the first session they did was on the REST API. They automate a ton of stuff at Chase. And Kyle walked through coding. He has coding examples out there of things to do. So this really is them trying to allow you to learn the various APIs because they've used them and they want to share the knowledge with everybody. So that's what the Coders Initiative is. So, and with that, I'll take time for questions.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. If anyone has questions for Jeffrey, please go ahead and put those in the chat. I was pretty blown away by it. You know, most of this stuff goes right over my head, but maybe one day it will make sense, something to aspire to, as Christina pointed out. Now,
Full
Jeffrey,
disclosure, I only started learning Python about 2 years ago. So
you got to start somewhere, right?
yeah.
Jeffrey, do you want to put your email in the chat if anyone has questions that come up later, if they want to contact you?
Sure.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so what's next? Please tell us what you thought about today's meeting. I'm going to put the link to that survey in the chat, as well as a link to register for next month's December TUG meeting. I do want to point out that you know, usually we start at 3:30, but at 3, but next month we have a slightly different time schedule on the meeting, so just be aware of that. And that is Eastern time, by the way. And the reasons you want to be at the December meeting, because we're going to have meet a community member with Matt Capobianco from Pierce, and tips and tricks with Anna Coroniotis from Duke, as well as using Tableau to present an interactive online fact book with Christy Simpson. So all 3 good reasons to register for next month's meeting. last but not least, if you are interested in presenting, and I'm not just talking about a long presentation, it can be that, it can be tips and tricks, it can be meet a community member, any of those things, go ahead and fill out our interest form. If you're not really certain what you want to present on, feel free to drop us a note and we can discuss some options. So that brings us to our the end of our meeting. And if you feel like sticking around for another half hour, we're going to have breakout rooms.